Okay, we're here with City Council candidate Ellis Raskin. Ellis, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Do you want to just tell us about yourself and why you're running for City Council this year?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me tonight. My name is Ellis Raskin. I'm the vice chair of the Santa Monica Planning Commission, and I'm in fact the only renter on the Planning Commission and a renter here in the Pico neighborhood. I first got involved in fighting evictions here in the Pico neighborhood. It was a time when our neighborhood was experiencing tremendous gentrification pressures, and a lot of people were getting forced out of their homes. And I've continued to fight on the front lines to protect renters, to stand up for progressive values, and to fight for social and environmental justice in our community. In my day job, I work as an environmental and land use attorney, primarily trying to solve long-term regional and urban planning issues. Through my work, I've helped protect coastal access, and I've helped save mountain lion habitat in the Santa Monica Mountains. And I will continue to fight at the front lines to protect workers, renters, and progressive values here in Santa Monica.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to ask you about progressive values. You talked a lot about your progressive values in your questionnaire, but there's a social media post where you commented, "We do need to confront the fact that limited resources, for example, water, will likely constrain development unless we import substantial water from outside the city." So that's been, I think, a pretty well debunked regressive talking point. Do you still stand by that statement, or if not, what did you mean when you said it?
Yeah, I don't think I quite meant it in the way that perhaps it sounds at the moment. And if I did say it like that, I think that was a mistake to write it that way. The reality is that we do have to be water self-sufficient in Santa Monica, and frankly, it's going to be a challenge to do so in the future, given that climate change threatens to well, rising sea levels will add salinity to our water table, which could potentially threaten water self-sufficiency. But it's a tremendously important dimension of our climate change sustainability goals. I think, given the limited resources that we have right now, it's more important than ever to continue to invest in water self-sufficiency so that we don't, in the long term, need to rely on imported water, which, frankly, is a challenge for many reasons.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, who's got the next question? Okay, Melissa.
I can, John. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we all piled on there. I'm going to go in a completely different direction. Ellis, I took note of what you said in response to a lot of our questions about Black Lives Matter and what you would do for BIPOC residents. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on reparations to Black families that were displaced from our city, which you mentioned in your questionnaire, and what would you advocate for as a council member?
Yeah, I'll say generally that, we need to make a concerted effort as a city and as elected leaders to really address the structural and institutional bases for oppression and discrimination in all its forms in Santa Monica. But, our city has a really despicable history when it comes especially to Black and Latino families that have been pushed out in Belmar through the creation of the freeway. I believe that I'm the only council member running who's calling for actual monetary reparations to go in the pockets of families who were displaced. I was the person who led the charge in the Planning Commission for getting policies into our upcoming 6-cycle housing elements to give displaced families and their descendants the first opportunity to come back into affordable housing here in Santa Monica. I've called for redesigns of the use of the freeway to ideally take it out in a few decades and replace it with uses that can help restore the land to families that have been displaced. So those are some of the broader strategies that I've called for. But again, I'll just reiterate that we need to address the institutional and structural issues that extend beyond mere monetary reparations.
Thanks.
Janine.
Okay, I read your questionnaire, and I saw that
you used the model of Oakland as a good example of city governments. I was curious to hear a little bit about that in terms of our city and how that would work. And the reason I was curious is because most recently this weekend, it doesn't seem like the city of Oakland is getting it right on public safety.
Yeah, I mentioned Oakland in large part because I'm a personal proponent of ranked choice voting, and I think if we were to transition to a system where we had a directly elected mayor, I think that Oakland is one model that we could potentially learn from on the governance model side of things. But you're absolutely right in terms of policing and what the city is actually doing policy wise. I didn't mean to suggest that we could learn from the city's policies per se, and I agree with you that I think that the city needs a lot of change. In fact, a friend of mine, Alyssa Villanueva, is running for mayor in Oakland, is trying to change that, and she was almost left off the ballot because the city clerk gave her the wrong information about the day to turn in her ballot. So I didn't mean to suggest that the city of Oakland was a model for all things, but just that its form of government was one that potentially we could take some hints from.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me, and I was looking at your public safety answers and trying to tie it all together.
Thank you. Dan.
Thanks, John. Hey, Ellis. I've watched a lot of planning commission meetings, and you are a strong advocate for CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. And, we've seen efforts across the state of California where CEQA ends up getting abused by groups that are not interested in development. What assurances can you provide housing advocates here in the city that as a CEQA advocate, you won't be doing that?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, Dan, and I've been on the record as somebody who believes in the strict enforcement of planning and zoning law in all respects. And it cuts both ways. I mean, it means on one respect that if you have a project where you haven't done your due diligence to find all of the environmental impacts and you haven't disclosed it, then you have to do your job as a public servant to ensure that the city is following its law with respect to its disclosure requirements. But on the flip side, if there's a code compliant project, you conversely have a role as a public servant to ensure that you follow the law and approve projects where you have a duty to do so under the law. I think progressives in all respects, at least all serious progressives, truly believe in the model of transit-oriented development and ensuring meaningful opportunities for folks to have affordable places to live. And I can assure you, and I can assure all folks in Santa Monica, that I'll make every effort as a city leader to ensure that folks do have meaningful opportunities to live where they work, to not be burdened by rents that are eating up as much as 60 or 70% of their monthly income, and to make meaningful efforts towards building transit-oriented development in our transit-rich city.
Thank you.
Trisha.
Okay, I have a PSROC question for you. Your answer about the PSROC is an important forum for dialogue, feedback, and public reflection. It should engage with public safety offers in a collaborative manner. The thing that bothered me about that statement was because it's almost as though public safety officers have taken over the PSROC. And the vice chair of it is a retired Santa Monica police officer. The POA has a seat at the table. And so, and in fact, some of them have objected to oversight, the word oversight or review, because their comments were, well, that implies that there's something wrong. Could you say which model it is of the PSROC that you were thinking of as a good, strong model?
Yeah, I'll answer this in a few different ways. I mean, I don't think that the PSROC will be doing its job effectively if it's effectively, well, the dialogue is controlled by those in positions of police power. You know, it's supposed to be a forum to bring to light opportunities to make policing more inclusive, more progressive, and to involve models of social justice. And I think that that can really only happen when the folks leading the PSROC are those who come from outside of the police community and give a forum to those who have been, you know, frankly, on the other, well, subject to oppression and the bad forms of policing that we've seen for many decades. You know, I think that a good leadership model for police oversight and reform is one that reimagines public safety holistically and really involves voices from minority communities and those who have been historically disadvantaged, especially here in the Pico neighborhood in Santa Monica.
Thank you.
Melissa.
Ellis, you obviously talked about this subject in your questionnaire a lot, but I just like to sort of hear the highlights of your thoughts on this topic. I want to hear more about how you would work to obviously increase affordable housing generally, but specifically you in multiple places made mention of the importance of workforce housing, especially as a key to fighting climate change. So what specific action if you were on the council?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about housing generally, I'll just say that, you know, we've got to make a concerted effort to meet our RHNA numbers over this cycle. And it's really not going to happen unless we really work meaningfully with partners at a regional and statewide level to get new sources of funding and to leverage, you know, other local sources of funding to build the affordable housing that we need. But we need to also look at ways in which we can, you know, earmark deed restricted housing for folks who work here and don't have a chance to live here and who are commuting 3 or 4 hours a day and suffer the personal, psychological, financial burdens of having to commute as far as Lancaster or further, or Riverside. I was just speaking the other day to somebody who commutes about 4.5 hours per day to a job, both ways here in Santa Monica. It's insane. It's completely unlivable, and you know the climate effects of this are going to be catastrophic. So you know, all that being said, you know, we've got limited land here in Santa Monica. It's expensive, and so when you're talking about meaningful strategies to build that housing, we've got to leverage public land in an effective way. We've got to leverage regional and local funding sources. We've got to look at underutilized sites and figure out how we can, you know, meaningfully hit the sweet spot to get the good transit-oriented development. And I've called for that in the Planning Commission to really, you know, get the best bang for our buck on transit-rich boulevards and in proximity to Expo line stations. But again, you know, it's not going to happen unless we work with state and regional partners to get funding for affordable housing.
Thank you. Does anyone else have one? Dolly.
Yes, I'm trying to make this into a question. Being a landmarks commissioner, I'm aware of a role you played in negotiating a win-win solution to tenants in a apartment building on San Vicente losing their wonderful middle lawn area where there were 8 or 7 mature trees that were going to be taken out so the owner could put in xeriscape, which would not allow people to walk barefoot or anything like that. And then you did negotiate something with the landlord that is a win-win. And I never got the full details. Could you tell me what happened with that and how you resolved that?
Sure, absolutely. And just for some background context, I've been working for a number of years here in Santa Monica to try to find ways to preserve our city's urban forest canopy. And my first appointed position was actually on the Urban Forest Task Force in 2017. And just shortly before the pandemic, we were at the cusp of going to City Council with a tree protection ordinance for Santa Monica. And unfortunately, that got a little bit derailed by COVID. But last year there was a project at 212 San Vicente that would have drastically changed the landscaping of a courtyard apartment in the San Vicente Historic Courtyard District, and it would have taken out a number of mature trees in the courtyard. I appealed that to the city council, and we ultimately negotiated with the property owner an alternative landscape plan that helped preserve trees in the courtyard in a manner that's more consistent with the historic district. I'll say generally that it was a win-win for a lot of people. It was a win for historic preservation. It was a win for people who love trees, and it was a win for the residents, most importantly, who get to enjoy their courtyard.
Thank you.
Dan.
Thanks, John. Ellis, earlier you mentioned support of housing around transit lines, which sparked a thought about just the metro line in general. Are you supportive of expanding future metro lines into Santa Monica, and if do you think they would best be suited?
Yeah, well, absolutely, I'm supportive. Sorry, the second part of it was where do you think they would best be suited? I missed the second part of that. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, there are certainly a number of parts of our city where I think more intense transit makes a lot of sense. But on the flip side, there are also parts of our city that are both currently and historically underserved by public transit. I look primarily at the north-south connections in our city that have historically not existed, in part because of the freeway. And that again goes back to the importance of taking that out. I mean, I think the long-term vision is to extend the Purple Line further as far as Santa Monica. I'd love to see that. I think it makes sense to have a dedicated rail line that perhaps goes down Lincoln or perhaps even Main Street, connecting Santa Monica to Venice. I mean, God, I love public transit. I'm a public transit nerd when it comes to this stuff, and I could talk for hours about this. I think we really need to take advantage of the benefits that bringing light rail can have to neighborhoods, and I sure hope to work towards that in the future.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for joining us, Ellis. Great to hear from you. Looking forward to having you at our debate in a few weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you again for this opportunity, and thank you all for your questions.
Have a good one.